Hello and welcome to Stand Up for Jesus. This is the fifth in our series of programs relating to what we call a theme of encouraging Christians to stand up for Jesus. And in the studio with me, I have the famous and infamous Doug Harris.
Infamous is far better.
The infamous Doug Harris, well known to every Revelation viewer that has ever touched and looked at the screen. But to a serious topic, we are concerned here at Revelation TV about the marginalisation of Christianity. It's been going on now for some decades, and Christianity has been written out of our public life, it's been written out of our national life. And we're trying to encourage Christians to join the fight back, and to do that at their local level. There are various people who are various groups, various Christian groups who are campaigning at national level to get Christian values into our public life. But we're trying to encourage you, the viewer, at local level to stand up for Jesus in your neighbourhood, in your workplace, in your school and so on. And during these past 4 programmes, we've been interviewing people who've been doing exactly that. And Doug and I thought we'd just take a little pause here on our 5th programme and look back a little bit and discuss really what we've seen so far. But the purpose behind all this is quite simply this: ordinary people, ordinary Christians, ordinary believers, we think, should be standing up for Jesus wherever they are. And we look first of all, you may remember it, Doug, we looked first of all at the very first programme was based around the whole issue of mosques. And we had quite an extensive time here in the programme with a guy called Ivor Hellberg. And he had been leading the local group in Camberley in Surrey to oppose that large mosque that they were then proposing to put up overseeing and looking over the parade ground at the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst. Mm-hmm. And Ivor is a Christian, and some of his group, the opposition group that he got together, are Christians, but some aren't. And they had really quite an experience. And the good news, actually, since we put that programme out, is that they've won their case. So that was really quite good. We're quite pleased about that. They won their case. The group that wanted to put up that mosque, the planning authorities have said that they can't. So I think that's something to be encouraged by. But I think what really, one of the issues for us, and one of the issues which we looked at then is, here as a Christian, he saw this mosque was to be put up, and it was quite a provocative act, he considered, and other people, not just Christians, considered it was a provocative act to put up this mosque with its minaret overlooking the Royal Military Academy, and he decided that he was going to oppose it. Mm. And he did so, and he was very much leaning on his Christian faith to do so. And we discussed, you may remember the whole thing about how do Christians enter into these politically sensitive areas, these politically correct areas and so on. And he said quite clearly that his faith had led him down that route. You may remember that. And,
yeah.
And one of the interesting things was the whole process of this campaign of opposing the mosque and standing up and saying this mosque should not happen, was that some members of his team, his opposition group, who had become lapsed Christians, they'd stopped going to church and so on, actually got back into their faith, if I could put it like that. Remember, there were some curses. One of the imams was putting Islamic curses on this opposition group, and they got really quite concerned about it. They got the Guildford diocesan exorcist from the Bishop of Guildford came and prayed with them and dealt with it. And some members of the group came back to the faith. But one of the issues is, have Christians got to be particularly careful, particularly sensitive in these areas? Could it be seen as a Christian attack on Muslims? And of course, the whole area of Islam in British society is a sensitive area anyway, isn't it? So
it was a very interesting step to take, and as you said, it could have been seen as provocative. And this is where I think what is so important when we stand up over such issues, it's important not only what we say, but how we say it. And that becomes so important, because they weren't anti-Islam, they weren't anti-Muslim. And they just felt that such a building in such a place was inappropriate. And very interesting, as you say, the planning people have actually agreed with them that is the case, that whereas it might be okay to build it elsewhere, certainly not there. Yeah. And I think we have to be very clear of what we're standing up for. And we've always put the positive side, haven't we, Alan? In other words, it's what we stand up for, not necessarily what we stand against.
Sure.
And if you just highlight all the time what we stand against, I think we can have problems. But when we say we're standing up for something, I think it's very much more positive. And even the opposition, quote, I think understands sometimes what people are saying.
I agree. I mean, what's good about it, what they and what we've been saying on these programmes and what Ivor was saying and acting out is as a Christian principle we can never get away with, because Jesus said, love your neighbour. Actually, Jesus went further. Jesus said, love your enemy.
Yes.
You know, so however you see the person that you may be disagreeing with, as a person, you should love them, you should respect them, you should always give them respect. So to stand with a great megaphone and shout abuse at them like perhaps some far-right political groups might do is not part of Christianity and never is. So we do speak the truth, but we speak the truth in love, through love for our neighbour. I think that was really quite important. And Ivor explained how actually he was working with the Muslims against the mosque. There were other Muslims who didn't feel this mosque was a good idea either. So he wasn't Islamophobic, he wasn't anti-them, he was respectful towards people, and his team were respectful toward people, but didn't feel this mosque was appropriate. They weren't against mosques, they aren't, you know, freedom of religion is one of the basic principles of our society. So not against all mosques, but this particular one was quite an issue.
And of course, in that programme, we dealt very much, this is something very much on your own heart and something which you've been through as well. And so far, haven't had quite such a good outcome of it.
It's ongoing. I mean,
Yes.
I've spent now the last 5 years fighting against what is known as the Olympic Mega Mosque in West Ham. And it's been quite a battle. We've had our ups and our downs and so on and so forth. And it's certainly not over yet. It's going to be a long one. The latest news for that one is that the people behind it, a group called Tablighi Jamaat, and their advisors, who are all English advisors, are saying they will produce the plans for that at the turn of the year, January, February of next year. So once those plans come up, our battle will get renewed. So we've had successes on that. They didn't manage to get it up in time for the Olympics. There's no way it'll be up for the Olympics.
Yes.
They've downsized it. Originally it was going to be some 45,000 people praying at the site. They say it's now down to 12,000. We're hoping to erode it further. But really we'd like to have the sort of success they've had at Camberley, where they've game, set and match to the opposition. So it's been really good.
And again, you've been at stress to show you are not anti-Muslim. In fact, there is, as you've said before, there are Muslims who are actually working with you in this campaign because they don't want this particular mega mosque there at all. And I think it's important. I guess at times we've got to be prepared to be misunderstood. We've almost got to be prepared to be pilloried for things we are doing because we're going to be misunderstood. But it seems the Lord himself says that will happen. You know, people are going to say things. But providing in our own hearts we have the principles of loving our neighbour, reaching out to them, not hating them, but feeling we have a real case, even though it's a different faith to ours, of saying no to that. We've got to take that stand. But it's not easy, is it, Alan?
No, it isn't.
Yeah, I mean, you know that yourself.
I mean, every now and again you get angry. You think, what on earth have they done that for? You know, and so on. But you have to keep coming back to that. And once you've got, you will be misunderstood, and people have all sorts of go. And as we go through and look at other situations that we've had on the programmes that we've had, you do get misunderstood. You do get accused of it being Islamophobic. You do get accused of being racist and these sort of issues. You be accused of just being fundamentalist, right-wing Christians, out of touch with what's going on, out of touch with modern society. All those sort of criticisms come at you. But if deep down, as you say, in your heart of heart, in your conscience, you say, actually, I'm speaking the truth, but I'm loving my neighbour. Those are seem to me the two key principles. I'm speaking the truth and I'm loving my neighbour. Then I think you can't go too far wrong. And I think you need to work it out, and especially if what we're trying to encourage the viewers to do is to do it within their neighbourhood. So you're actually talking about situations and people and projects that the people on the other side you could well bump into at the Tesco's or Sainsbury's on Tuesday morning, you know. So they are literally your neighbours. You're not just a great national campaign. You're speaking about people who don't actually meet day by day. We're talking about literally your neighbours. So you need to try and maintain a respectful and courteous relationship with them. I had that myself. I mean, I live close to the mosque, and I live in a Muslim majority area. So I'm well aware that the people I bump into literally on the street or go into the shops with locally may well be supporters of the mosque, which I'm quite publicly and openly opposing it. But I wouldn't want them with validly to say that I've shown any aggression towards them personally or towards them as people or towards Muslims. So I absolutely am never Muslimophobic, ever. You know,
right.
Muslims are they're human beings,
yes,
the same as
absolutely.
you and I. I see them. They're bringing up their kids. They're trying to look after their houses. They're going shopping. They're doing exactly the same sort of thing as you or I do. They go to the mosque instead, and they have a different set of values from ours. But you know, generally they want to do what your average person does. So,
and in those two cases, we get different areas coming out. I mean, if you win, you don't gloat.
Absolutely.
You know, you don't say, see, we told you. That's it, the planning permission said, and you don't gloat over it. And in your case, as you've already said, it's something you're willing to go on and go on going on. I mean, you have, I don't think it's actually, the word is mentioned in the Bible, but I always call about stickability. You know, I think the Bible calls it perseverance, but I think stickability is nicer. But you stick at something. And as you say, you've been through already several months and differing, but you're not going to give up because you feel this is something I need to stand up for. I feel this is something the Lord wants me to do, to stand up for. Therefore, I am not going to give up until there's nothing more to stand up for. I mean, and I think that's so necessary, isn't it?
I would say that, and I say it to any viewer who's considering anything. Do you think the Lord would have you do this? Yes. Ultimately, of course you can get it wrong. At some level, I feel, yes, the Lord has called me to stand up against this particular mosque. I could be wrong, and I have to take responsibility for my own action. I'm not sort of putting it all on him in that sense. But I wouldn't do it if I thought he was against it, and I wouldn't do it if I couldn't find a Christian way of doing it, or doing it Christianly is another way of putting it. But I think it's quite important, and whatever project that you stand up for or stand up against in your locality, you need to feel, yes, God would have me do this, and I'm going to do it Christianly. I'm going to do it as a Christian, quite publicly as a Christian. Just not long ago, I was down in Colchester, and there are Christians down in Colchester who want to promote the whole idea of marriage. Now that, in this day and age, becomes controversial, because immediately if you're promoting a marriage-based family, what about single mums? What about gays and so on and so forth? Not that I'm lumping it, but what about cohabitees, people who choose not to get married? And yet they say marriage is a good thing, and they're right. Marriage is good for society because it gives much more stability, gives much more commitment for the children who you're bringing up, and that's statistically proven. And they're promoting it, but they're promoting it firmly and clearly. The marriage-based family is the right thing, so they tell the truth, but they don't do that in any condemning way of those that choose other lifestyles. They're free to choose other lifestyles, but we believe this is the best. I think if you can get that balance, pleasant, courteous, respectful, but nonetheless insisting and putting your story forward, whatever your story is, I think God will be pleased at that.
But isn't it sad today that, you know, if you made that statement, you know, 10, 15 years ago, we're standing up for family values, people would almost ask you, well, why? Because, you know, we're okay. But isn't it sad today that when you have an opinion of this I believe is best, this is certainly the way I want to go, and I want to put that forward as a possibility, as something to really consider, the amount of people that say you're bigoted. But you know, it's such a shame, because I can have my opinion and I can stand for it. They can have their opinion. But you know, if we're bigoted, so are they. And you know, but really, you have got to be ready to face that these days. I mean, we're fighting sometimes a rearguard action of saying we believe this is right, we believe this is true. And we've almost lost the middle ground. We're almost, you know, in the defensive half, aren't we, all the time?
And it's true. I mean, the argument that Christians are bigoted has been used for so long that that's what it is. You just have to ignore it. I mean, it simply isn't true. But not only that, you begin to see the tide is beginning to move the other way. I see there's now the debate. We're going to talk in a bit about sex education in schools, but I don't want to talk about sex education. I want to talk about teaching evolution versus creation.
Yes.
And you'll see that Richard Attenborough has come out in favour of what Richard Dawkins has been saying and others, that actually schools should not be allowed to teach creationism, of any form of creationism at all. They should actually only be able to teach evolution, because they say that's scientifically proven, it's the only sound way of doing it. How they get there, I'm not quite sure, when it's certainly a debatable theory, even amongst those who don't take a Christian or creationist position. Admit it's a theory,
yes,
and it's not like saying 2 and 2 makes 4. That's no more a theory, that's a fact.
Yes.
But it's not like that. But what interests me is those who consider themselves to be open-minded and liberal and the rest of it actually are proving themselves to be actually quite bigoted and dogmatic, and saying, actually, this is the way, and we can't allow people to teach any other way but our way.
I know.
You know what I mean? And so all Richard Dawkins, all this sort of liberal, give me the facts, whatever facts, if the facts are there, I'll believe whatever, give me the facts. I'm open-minded, whatever the facts. But actually, when it comes to this, it's just a load of nonsense.
That's
and
right.
actually, they show that they are now become the bigots.
Yes.
They are the ones that's going to insist on their way or no way. And that's what really interesting. And we're the ones that are saying, well, actually, why don't we allow the children to learn all the different ways?
Yes,
and
absolutely, and let them take it. And it's been interesting. I mean, that I don't know if you saw a while back, we had that interview with Jeremy Paxman and Richard Dawkins, and the more I looked at it, I mean, they were saying, of course, it is a fact that Genesis is a myth. And I thought, hang on a minute. Where is the fact that Genesis is a myth? And and if you believe in the Christian stuff, you're a little bit simple-minded, or whatever phraseology they use. I thought, where does all this come from? And yeah, evolution is absolutely true. You've got to believe in evolution. You've got to believe in this, and it. Really, they're not putting forward any arguments anymore. And I think there has been a time in the past where maybe Christians have been guilty of doing that. And that's why I feel, as we're talking, and as we did talk in each episode of Stand Up for Jesus, it's important that you know the way to put it forward. And it's important that you know your subject. And you don't just say, we're right, you're wrong. We say, we believe we're right because, boom, 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 boom. And, now they're saying evolution's true, everything else is myth. And, and bless him, Richard Dawkins says, of course, it's fine. Maybe some people need to believe this myth, and I thought, oh. I just laughed. I had to laugh at it. I mean, and I'll tell you why I did. Because I remembered the psalm, which says, God sits in the heavens and laughs. He's saying, guys, you're all going to end your life one of these days, and you'll find out. God just laughs.
So while we're talking about schools, let's go on to the second of our programmes, which is about sex education in primary schools. Remember, there was a woman, a Christian woman from the north of England, Ruth Pond, who was talking about her experience, how she suddenly found what her daughter was being taught in the primary school. I was utterly shocked and started inquiring about it, found out about it, and was shocked by it. And then we had Antonia Tully from the Society for the Protection of Unborn Children, and talked about the Safe at School campaign, which she herself is running, and trying to sort of make it so you can be quite clear what your children are being taught. And I guess there are a lot of viewers here watching us now and watching us then who really thought this was quite important. In fact, I met a woman who'd watched that programme, and she said, I bumped into her at a church event, and she said she'd watched the programme and her daughter had just started reception, the lowest possible level at a primary school. And she said, I didn't know about all this. She said it was really very, very interesting. She said, I'm going to go and find out what this school is teaching. Well, a reception level, they won't teach anything, but she was going to go and find out. And I was really encouraged by that. I thought that's what we want our viewers to be doing, to go and find out if they got children at primary school, go and take an interest. They had the right to know. Legally, they had the right to know. And they also need to know that their school, there is no obligation on any primary school to teach sex education at all. It's a choice of the governors of that particular school. so they can go and find out, is sex education being taught, and if so, what is the content of that sex education? And I think it's pretty shocking what some parents have found up and down the country. Not all schools. I mean, I've got two daughters at primary school, aged 9 and 10, and I checked up. I was invited to, and I checked up what they were being taught, and I thought it was actually very good stuff. There was no talk about relationships, that sort of thing. They were taught some of the primary biology, which especially young girls who are coming up to that time of life need to know. So our school was a good one. But there are others where some pretty horrendous stuff is being put out at primary school level.
Well, there are, and you see, you said something very interesting there, because, I mean, I was a governor in school for 25 years, and we used to have to approve, or certainly a number of the governors, you could delegate it, but you had to approve what particular material you were using. And I guess I'm a little horrified that people that are responsible for schools and responsible for the running of schools, not necessarily fully the curriculum, but certainly the running and the safety of children in schools. I mean, that is very much the responsibility of the governors. I'm horrified at some of the material they allow to be used. But certainly at the school I was at, after we approved it, we invited all our parents to come and see it. I think what was sad was the few parents that actually turned up to such a time.
Really?
And I think that was sad. And I would hope that what happened, and obviously that particular woman responded that spoke to you, I would hope that programme, if it did nothing else, it made Christian parents sit up and take notice and say, I need to find out, what are my children going to be taught? Am I happy about it? Do I need to communicate here? Or do I just, can I leave it and be happy?
You say only not many parents turned up. That implies, of course, if you look at turn it the other way up, if Christian parents did turn up, they would have a larger voice because of the forum. And if only 5 parents turn up and 3 of them are Christians, actually they have a larger voice of what's going on.
I mean, that's true.
Than elsewhere.
I mean, I don't know if there's more these days, but this is going back 10, 15 years, but that certainly was the case.
Well, actually, when at our school they gave 2 sessions, I went along to the first one there. There was myself, I was the only father who was there, the rest were all mothers. Because I'm in a Muslim majority area, probably there were about 8 others there, and probably 6 of those were Muslim mothers with their hijabs and so on. Yes. And they're really quite concerned about the sex education. We're on the same page when it comes to the whole sort of thing.
Yes.
And they're asking, what rights do we have to take our child out of sex education? And of course they do have the right to take their children out of it. But I was pleased with our own daughter's stuff. But we need to be clear, there is some pretty horrendous stuff going out there, and it's all part of the agenda of the permissive
society.
Sex educationists, of the gay lobby and so on, to get their particular story out there. And they do it all on the basis that give the children the information, they'll take the right decisions. Sexual health, we must stop them, give them. We're not talking about primary school children now, we're talking about secondary, but give them condoms and allow daughters to have abortions encourage them to have an abortion without their parents knowing or having any say, and all those sort of things that's been going on for decades now. And as Christians and as Christian parents, we need to stand against the tide and begin to turn the tide. And we see what's happening in our society. The whole sexualization of our society, the permissive society, leading up to slut walks and all these other sort of things. We need to be able to say to the schools, actually not in our school, and so on and so forth. It may not necessarily be popular, but if you can put forward your case reasonably, respectfully, and say, actually, I don't want my daughter or my son taught that sort of thing. We don't think it's appropriate. And actually, we think, because we're Christians, we'd like to make sure there's abstinence as one option, at least, that's taught to them, and that sort of thing. I think that would be a good thing to do. But of course, like Islam, it's a sensitive area, and it's an area which you get attacked, old-fashioned and fuddy-duddy, and get with it, and look at this is the 21st century. We've got past all that, but look at the results of all that.
But you see, and even, when you look at the results of the so-called permissive society, just from the social point of view, not from, and there is enough evidence there to show that there are some major problems have arisen because we've just allowed free love, free sex, everything else, without putting it in its right context and with safety and security in mind. And you know, and I think we need, if you're in that situation as a parent, you need to get, and there are groups that provide such material, and we need to be getting hold of such material, and we need to be dealing with those issues. As you know, to see what is happening, what's being taught, what could we say, what safeguards are being put in. You just can't take them all away and say, do what you like. It just doesn't work like that.
Doug, we're coming towards the end of this programme now. We've only got a moment left, but I think I'd like to use this. We've got another programme to come up, and
Yes.
I'd like to encourage viewers, if you would, to email in your own experiences of where perhaps you have stood up or seen other Christians standing up for Jesus in your local community, in your neighbourhood. It doesn't matter the issue. It doesn't matter the issue at all, but we'd like to know your stories, and if it seems appropriate, we'll get in touch with you and perhaps put your stories onto Revelation TV. If we got sufficient numbers coming in, we'd have another series of programmes and so on. So do email us in or phone in, and whatever the email address will be up on the screen. Do email us in and let us know about your story, and we'll be back in contact with you about that perhaps and hear what you've got to say. We think it's important. Christianity is under attack. Christianity is being marginalised. We need men and women, boys and girls, to stand up for their faith. And we're asking you, the Revelation viewers, to do that in your area. Don't be ashamed of the gospel. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Paul said, I am not ashamed of the gospel. And we don't need to be ashamed of the gospel. We don't need to be ashamed of being Christians. So bless you all, and we'd love to hear your emails, and see you next week.